Great, thank you so very much, and thanks you everyone for joining us today. So we're going to be talking about Geo Report Designer and Columnar. We'll do some introductions, a little bit of housekeeping. I'll give you a very quick Intellias overview. We're going to talk about what we're talking about, why we're talking about it, and how we're going to address it. And then we will, as Chandra indicated, take questions at the end of the session. So my name is Debbie Sherman. I am the FSM Solution Architect here at Intellias. And joining me today is Mr. Mike Beyer, who is our FSM Principal Consultant, and Chandra Heron, who is our Director of Business Development. As Chandra indicated, questions go in the chat. We'll review at the end of the webinar. And you can find us on both YouTube and LinkedIn. So a little bit about Intellias. So Intellias is headquartered in Dallas, Texas. We also have a very large technical office in downtown Chicago. We were established in 1999. We are an Infor Alliance partner and Cloud Suite specialized. We offer consulting services in the areas of loss and technical services, loss and application consulting, Infor Cloud services, and Infor Cloud Suite consulting on the HR talent side and the finance and supply management side. We also have other software offerings that are built to help increase efficiencies within both Lawson and FSM. And last summer, the founder of our company, Chad Mitchell, presented our new expense management software that works on the HRT talent side. And coming very soon, he will also be presenting on the new payables management, which is a little bit of OCR and getting invoices into the system. So look for that probably in February. All right, so the what, the why, and the how. All right, what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about how your organization can leverage Geo Report Designer and Columnar to help you create flexible, insightful, and presentation-ready financial reporting. Why are we talking about this? Well, many organizations are only scratching the surface when it comes to reporting capabilities within FSM. And this is because they're not aware of what tools can be used to meet their reporting needs. There are so many different options within FSM, such as list views, and those list views can be configured. They can be turned into reports. There's also out-of-the-box reporting that you didn't have in Lawson, and that many people are not aware exist within FSM. There's Geo Report Designer, there's the Columnar, and then also Application Studio. So today we're going to focus on Geo Report Designer and Columnar. And last but not least, how? So how do we have better reporting? Well, we're going to utilize Infor's robust reporting capabilities. We're going to talk about determining best practices and how to develop a plan for managing your reporting and making it more efficient and ensuring that it meets the needs of your organization. All right. So the topics today will be common challenges we see with reporting within FSM. We're going to explore both the GL Report Designer tool and Columnar. We're going to talk about how to get there and some of the prerequisites for getting there, and then talk a little bit about developing your plan. So, common challenges that we see today in FSM. You've implemented FSM, but your reporting is not meeting your organization's needs. That could be because the reports lack data, right? So many of the out-of-the-box reports do not include all the fields that you need to provide a full financial picture within your organization. There could be gaps in those fields, and in many cases, you may need to manipulate that by pulling those reports out of the system, adding additional data from spreadsheets to get a final product that is useful to your organization. You may be combining multiple reports within the system to obtain the needed results. You may not have the ability to perform multi-period comparisons or the ability to compare budgets to actuals, looking at variances or perhaps percentage of variances. So today we're focused on GL, but this isn't just a problem with GL. This is across all the modules within FSM. Okay. Another common challenge is presentation ready reports. So often the standard reports that are coming out of FSM do not meet executive or stakeholder presentation requirements. That in itself creates increased manual efforts. Often customization is required. We have to rely on IT for development with those customizations, or a lot of us are utilizing a third-party tool to take the data from FSM and transforming it into reports that meet our needs or presentations that meet our needs. There's also a lack of training, time, and resources. I think we've all experienced that in today's world where we're doing much more with a lot less. So with a lack of training, we don't know what we don't know, right? There could have been inadequate or lack of formal training in the system and how to use it. We see this very commonly with a lot of the clients that we work with, and not just in FSM, but in Lawson as well. There's also that question, what tool can I use to get the data or the information that I need, right? And again, we're not just talking about GL Report Designer or Columnar. We're talking about system reports. We're talking about list views that can be utilized or exported to obtain data, sort data, and get information that we need. And of course, I think the biggest part of this is the time and resources, right? When we implement FSM, we all know that during that implementation, not only are we supposed to be 50% devoted or dedicated to this implementation project, but we also have our real jobs to do. So training efforts are often impacted by competing priorities and limited resources, right? Again, many users have no idea where to go and find the data they're looking for. Is there already a report in the system that provides all the data or information I need? Is there a list view that can be created? Or can we utilize GL Report Designer and Columnar to get what we need? Unfortunately, all these things have a negative impact on our business, right? Because we have increased manual effort and oftentimes then have to perform reconciliations outside of the system. So what that does is it delays our financial insights and in many cases can reduce the confidence that we have in data accuracy. So how can we help alleviate some of that? Well, let's explore GL Report Designer. And let's talk about some of the key features and capabilities that GL Report Designer offers. So one key factor and most important, and I think something that Mike and I both really like, is that GL Report Designer allows your finance users to actually build their own reports. So they can customize them, maintain them, run and distribute them without heavy IT involvement. And if you have users that are very adept in the system, many times they can do all of this themselves. So GL Report Designer consists of a built-in financial reporting layer that sits on top of your GL. And I am not a technical person, so I really am going to speak to this in terms of what it means to us as finance individuals. But it sits on top of the GL and it focuses on GL totals and aggregated data. So it allows us to create ad hoc and tailored financial reports, such as our month-end financial reporting, simple ad hoc requests, and do comparative analysis. So for instance, budget versus actuals, looking at current period versus prior period, or current year versus prior year, some of the things that do not come out of the box. Or perhaps we could find out of the box, but don't have all the data that we need. It allows us to access current GL data directly and return those balances and totals quickly. It also gives us the ability to do custom layouts that match our organizational needs, right? So many times the out-of-the-box report may not be in the format you want, so we can lay that out differently. It also allows us to define what that report layout is going to look like, right? And that can be based on your account structures and dimensions. So we have row views. If you think about creating a pivot table, it's a little bit like that, where we're creating those row views, determining what data we're going to show. So what GL accounts and data sets are we going to pull in? It allows us to configure our columns. So how's our data going to be calculated? Do we want to calculate by period totals, year-to-date totals? Do we want to show variances in dollars and percent of total budget utilized? And that allows us to assemble the report by selecting the rows and columns that we want in the appropriate format, and also allows us to add filters and labels. We can then preview that report and run it. Allows us to check the layout, generate the report, make adjustments to the report, and move forward. All user-friendly. The other thing it allows us to do is filters and drill down capabilities. So columns can be filtered by accounts, by any of the dimensions you've created, and even combined filters. And of course, there's drill down capability into the transactional details behind the summaries, which allow us to investigate variances or just get to that transactional level to see where the entries are coming from. All right. And then another, great feature, distribution. These reports can be saved, they can be scheduled, and they can be shared with stakeholders across your organization. All right. And final, and very important, is security. So GL Report Designer will integrate with the standard delivered Infor Security, so reports follow and respect the user roles and permissions, which is very important, I know, to most organizations. So your users, based on their permissions and the roles assigned to them, will not be seeing data they are not supposed to be seeing. Some of the examples, and I'll show you some of the examples of some of these reports, but some of the reports you can build would be a financial statement, an income statement, and a balance sheet. Looking at budgets versus actuals with variances. And you can run those by account, by department, by fund or project. You can look at year-to-date with period comparisons, prior year comparisons. So very broad level of what we can do here. A trial balance. We can do it by account and period. Run a trial balance by entity, fund, or even a business unit, and also include multi-period. A simple expense detail by department or cost center, and I do have an example we've created for a client with that also includes budget information. Consolidated financial summaries, and even something as simple as journal entry listings. So some examples around this, these are two examples of an income statement. So the example on the left shows how we can add a company name at the top. We've labeled the report income statement. We can even include company addresses depending on where we're going to deliver this report to. You also see a create date and a date issued. This particular income statement summarizes the revenue, cost of goods sold, operating expenses, and then totals all of this to show an operating profit or loss, and even a profit or loss prior to taxes. So of course, this is all dependent on the setup and roll up within your charts and different dimensional structures. The one on the right, a little bit different of a setup, shows actuals for each individual period, as well as net revenue, including your revenue streams, as well as sales returns, the total cost of goods sold, your gross profit, what that profit margin is represented by a percentage, and then listing the expenses below. And also, if you notice, the report on the left is also by year, which could be helpful depending on what you're utilizing these reports to, or what maybe your reporting requirements are based on regulations, depending on the industry that you're in. The next one that I have to show you is an example of a simple statement of expenses that includes budget with actuals for the period and year to date. And I apologize, my coworker is misbehaving here. So this particular one shows us a statement of expenses, right? It's showing a fund, or what you would consider an accounting entity or company. It shows the department number, and then also shows the account with the account description. So what else this shows is that we have the current budget for the year. We have the expended budget amount month to date, the expended budget year to date, and the remaining or unappropriated balance of the budget for the year. Now, this terminology always changes across organizations. This particular client is government, so their verbiage is a little bit different. And then what percentage of the budget remains? So there's, as you can see, very simple report used and distributed monthly to a department. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about columnar reporting. So the key features and capabilities around that include that the performance, within Columnar, there is a performance and reporting optimization layer. All right, so Columnar consists of column-oriented data or data format that's used behind the scenes. And what this does is support fast aggregation of data and reporting for financial reports. So it really is an engine sitting back there that speeds everything up to make it simplistic. It supports GL Report Designer as well as other Infor FSM financial reports. And it holds the financial data extracted from the GL and allows that reporting engine to pull that data quickly, to do faster drills, to aggregate that data for totals and filters. All right, there's replication for reporting. So there are replication sets specific to both GL Report Designer as well as Columnar reporting, but they extract the data for efficient accessing and reporting. And it improves performance for financial reporting, especially for those organizations that have a very high volume of financial entries and utilize multiple dimensions. So remember in FSM, you're not limited to the standard, company accounting unit, account activity, and account category in Lawson, but you have 14 dimensions within FSM, many of which are, I think 10 are user defined. So the columnar is accessible from global ledger analysis for both for totals, finance transactions, and finance transaction details. And I'll show you some screens related to those. It's also accessible for some of the other modules. Receivables uses it, as does assets. And I believe coming in the future, Infor's roadmap is also going to be addressing payables and some of the other modules. So again, columnar reporting allows us to define the data that we're using. There will be replicated tabs within each of the areas for the totals list views, the finance transaction list view, and the finance transaction detail list view. And again, I'll show you what those look like. So you can define individual parameter dimensions such as your entity or company, your department or cost center, your accounts, scenarios for budgeting purposes on the totals replication tab, periods, etc. You can utilize dimension structures to return financial data for reporting. So instead of your standard views where you're picking an account and a period for a company or a multitude of companies, this allows you to actually pick within, for instance, you have your master chart and you want to pull just assets, or you want to pull just operating expenses or a subset of operating expenses. This allows you to do that as well. And then you can select options for totals by project or account, and there are some other additional options as well. Again, there are filters and drill down capabilities within Columnar, so you can get to the transaction details behind those summaries at the transactional level. These defined reports can be saved and exported for multi-purpose use as well. So Columnar works a little bit like this. This diagram is a visual workflow of how the data resides within the system. So GL transactions contain our raw transactional data. So these are the journal entries that we enter every day, the invoices that are entered through AP or AR, payments that are made from AP, or receipts in cash and receivables, right? And then the columnar tables have a column-oriented structure with pre-aggregated totals, again, that allow for that fast retrieval of the data and include every one of your finance dimensions. Those feed into, so your GL transactions feed into the columnar tables. The columnar tables feed into the GL report designer custom reports, which use, user-defined rows and columns and the filters and calculations. It's pulling that data from Columnar and supports the drill down. And then Also, it allows for, so the GL Report Designer custom reports can then feed into your dashboards, which allow you to provide visual reports and charts. And because of this, these dashboards can very quickly be updated because that columnar data running behind already contains that aggregated data. So across the board, it's really supporting your financial reporting, dashboards, etc. All right, so let's take a look at what Columnar looks like. So here's your totals search list view within FSM. Notice up at the top right here, we have a replicated tab, and I'm going to talk a little bit here in a little bit about what the prerequisites are, because there are some steps you need to take for this replicated tab to show up. So this particular one shows a budget scenario for a specific summary within the master chart. So I've selected a budget scenario. This happens to be a calendar year budget for one of our clients. I'm looking at a period end date of 7/31/25. And notice here you have ledger, fund, and their fund is the accounting entity, or what you may all know as company, account, sub-account, chart section, etc. But you also have this structure section, right? And then you have your dimensions down here, your department, the interfund, and the project. So this is what I find so valuable to this columnar reporting, is that you can pull a department structure and look at just a department parent. So if you're rolling up your departments, you can pick certain subsets of that data as long as your financial structure and your FEG supports it. For this particular example, I'm looking at the chart and only at operational expenses. So I want to see budget information for operational expenses for a period ending 7/31/25. And it returns that data with totals. And again, it lays it out as you would, most likely see it with your company, your account, your project, the scenario, the period, what calendar year, the period, the display period, your system, etc. And as you all know, these can also be personalized or configured for your organization's needs. This next one is within finance transaction detail. So this is a columnar view that's addressing asset transactions for a specific period. So perhaps you're wanting to look at what assets have been, how the asset accounts have changed over the course of a period for a specific department or department roll-up. So for this particular one, again, you see this replicated tab. And I'm looking at everything for the period of July 1 through July 31st of 2025. I've pulled my master department structure, and I'm looking at summary 1. I'm also pulling my master chart, and only for the asset accounts. And when I click search, whoops, I apologize. And when I click search, it returns all transactions for those particular accounts. And again, whether they are debits or credits. I love this. Many times, this is newer functionality and we're used to seeing just a total, but we also now have debits and credits listed out. All right, so how do we get there? As I said, there's some prerequisites to doing this, right? So GL Report Designer requires Infor provisioning. So this is not something you can decide I'm going to start using tomorrow. You've got to submit an incident with Infor and ask them to provision the GL Report Designer for you. Both GL Report Designer and Columnar are dependent on the refresh of their associated replication sets. You'll find in much of the documentation that Infor has on these that it indicates real time. Real time is relative. That's going to depend on how often you're refreshing your replication sets. So those rep sets can be scheduled based on the needs of your organization. If you are refreshing your rep sets every hour, then your data is good every hour. If you are only refreshing them once a day, then you know that when you come in the next morning, the data is fresh from the prior day. Columnar reporting has to be enabled within GL administration. So there's a couple of things you have to do there. You've got to create and review your replication sets. You have to enable the GL transaction analysis and columnar search. And then you do have to go into administration console and define those configuration parameters for the Global Ledger Columnar panels and the Global Ledger Columnar search. Many of you will not have access to that piece of it and will require some assistance from your IT team. So, how do you get there? What are our options for ensuring we get Geo Report Designer done? We determine what needs to change. How do we start creating new reports? So you have a couple of options, right? You can do this internally. You can develop an internal plan to perform your gap analysis, design, build, and testing. That requires resources, time, and effort. Well worth the effort to do. And in some cases will require IT involvement. And I'm going to talk about what you do to get to those steps. And then I'm also going to talk about engaging Intellias to assist with that. We can alleviate some of those required resources, time, and effort as well. So let's talk about bringing it into the house. And this is a slide that I cover in a lot of the webinars that we do, because I think this is very important information. At which point you have implemented FSM and you are now finding these gaps related to reporting. Where do I find this? Where do I go to get this information? How can I add certain fields to a report? Can I add certain fields to a report? What do I not know? Right? So there's a lot of things to consider. And when you're making changes within your organization, you need to think about what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and what it's going to take to make it happen. So that said, you want to prepare ahead. Think about in advance what you need to do, because what you do ahead of time is going to make all the difference and will certainly ensure success. You need to define your resources. Do we need to add resources? Do we need to change the tasks our resources are accomplishing so this is successful? And this is challenging for every organization. We all are facing resource constraints, and sometimes dedicated resource for a project, it's not always realistic to consider that they can spend the amount of time needed, right? So we've got to find that appropriate balance. You need a realistic timeline. Obviously, as I said, there are prerequisites. We know if you're going to enter a ticket with Infor, it's going to be a few days before you can get Geo Report Designer provisioned. So consider that. Consider what your resources need to do and accomplish. What time of the year is it? Do I have blackout periods? All of those things are things you need to look at. And of course, you've got to design, build, and deploy. You can't just implement these two things and think it's going to solve all your problems. You really need to do a report gap analysis. You've got to review your current reporting. Determine if and how changes are going to be made. Adopt a 360 approach to ensure that your building blocks are going to give you that successful outcome you're looking for, right? And if you do all those things appropriately, then getting those reports out into production to your users is going to be a snap. And always keep an open mind, right? Consider the benefits of the outcome. It's always painful to make changes, always painful to make changes, but I believe it's worth the time and the effort, and change is progress. All right, so let's talk about your roadmap. So for you all, if you decide to do this in-house, you've got to define a roadmap. You've got to look at your work effort and the implementation start to finish. You need to identify tasks. So I've listed some of those here for you. First thing on the list, provision Geo Report Designer. Get your Columnar enabled. Create and schedule those replication sets. Columnar, once enabled, is useful to your team immediately. Plan your integration with existing systems. One thing you really need to consider, especially with Geo Report Designer, is what data is coming in to FSM from outside sources. It's also important how the rep sets are scheduled, because based on the schedule for that data flowing into FSM, you want to make sure that the rep sets are scheduled so they're pulling that data after the fact. Then start identifying existing gaps in your current reporting. Perform that report gap analysis to highlight missing or incomplete data, fields, and reporting elements. Document that. Restructure your reporting framework to address those identified gaps and to improve data completeness. Does that mean that we're going to need to perhaps restructure our department? Do we need to add additional summaries to report? Do we need to add additional alternate structures to identify reports? I think Mike and I are always so surprised when we're working with a new client, whether that's a client we're bringing from Lawson to FSM or a client that's already on FSM that is looking uh, to really enhance their reporting needs and to make it more robust, that they don't understand you have the ability to create additional reporting basis to support your reports, additional structures. I see a good example is in healthcare for Medicare reporting. We can summarize a new chart that only includes the accounts that are needed for that regulatory reporting. And so many people don't know that. But that's where, you can take a look at those. And again, we're happy to help with any of that. Once you determine that, prioritize the reports. Make that list, identify the gaps, and then start prioritizing them. Which is the one that has the most bang for the buck, that's the most important to get done first. Then start your redesign process. Close those gaps. Make sure you're aligned with your stakeholder requirements. One of the things we do during an implementation, or again, any enhancement proficiencies, is we sit down and we do a discovery workshop and ask, where's your pain point? So ask your stakeholders, what's the biggest problem you're seeing? Make sure that when you're redesigning those reports, you're aligning with those pain points and challenges. And of course, testing. You want to test every possible scenario. Consider what you do at the beginning of the month, what you're doing weekly, what you're doing in the middle of the month, and different things you might perform at the end of the month. And then, of course, a cutover plan. Once everything's done, you've redesigned the reports, they've passed testing, when and how are we going to get them into production? And of course, the next step is identifying target dates. Spread them out to ensure success. Make sure you're providing ample time to your resources to perform the tasks, and consider resource availability. Then, of course, the next step is to assign the resources and assign the tasks and get it done. It's going to take effort, but I think it's well going to be worth it. So one of the things Intellias started doing recently is that we have an Intellias reporting workshop, because again, of clients that we work with who have already implemented FSM and are really struggling with reports. We developed a reporting workshop. It consists of a reporting discovery workshop, a 3-day reporting workshop, reporting strategy and enablement, and then ad hoc support from both a technical and functional Q&A support perspective, where we can help with issue resolution, report development, and application support. So some of the deliverables we do, and again, this is still in line with what you all need to do, even if you do it internally. It kind of outlines what you could do there as well. But our reporting workshops can be customized by client dependent on your needs. We start out with that half-day reporting discovery workshop to review your current report inventory. We then identify and understand your current reporting challenges, and we evaluate current system setup and reporting structure. Remember, I talked about what does your FEG look like? Within that FEG, what do the structures look like? Have you defined the structures that are going to support any current reports you're running or the reports you create in the future, whether that be with GL Report Designer or even Application Studio? So if many of you are familiar with Application Studio, it's also covered here in our reporting workshops, even though I didn't discuss it today during the webinar. Then we move into the reporting workshop, and we're going to cover landmark list view reports. We're going to talk about developing custom landmark list view reports, and we're talking about sitting and going through how to do this. We are going to enable you. So we will help you define and develop those reports. We talk about OLAP concepts related to the cubes, how to deploy and cube overview. Let's see, what else? We do report development with you, and end user support is needed. How do we access reports into list views? How can you change those and configure them? We talk about report administration, and then also securing reports and report distribution. The Application Studio piece of it includes the basics of Application Studio, slice and hyperblock, styling, parameterization, deploying reports to the report catalog, dimension access control, and securing data within the cubes. And then we talk about reporting strategy and enablement, which covers aligning reporting tools with business needs. So basically, when we're doing that report cap analysis, what tool is going to be best to give you the report that you need, right? So, and then establishing reporting governance. So what are the best practices for report development? How do you maintain and distribute your reports? And we enable you to become self-sufficient. So when we do these workshops, customer responsibilities may include access to your non-production environments. So we can build, we can help you build, we can train, access to applicable business units and staff to do recovery and discovery sessions, and access to current reports and samples. So the outcome is that we're maximizing utilization of Infor's out-of-the-box reporting capabilities and tools. So again, didn't talk a lot about Application Studio today because that is really more of an IT tool than it is a user tool. But 2 plans, one for you to do internally, one for you to engage Intellias with a reporting workshop. Chandra, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
I think you covered it perfectly. Sometimes the hardest part of getting started, finding those gaps and
Yeah.
figuring out what tools to use. So I think those workshops can really help. We can also help with just the basics, uncovering the gaps, and then, send you on your way to build the reports. So at any level, we can support you with this.
Yep.
Debbie does have a few contacts listed here, and we will also be sending out this recording and slide deck in the next day or so. Didn't have a ton of questions come in during the session. Do these reports have drill down capabilities?
Yes, they absolutely do. Geo Report Designer has drill down capabilities, and of course, with Columnar, as you saw, the same in totals, finance transactions, and finance transaction details, you can absolutely drill back.
Okay, and
So
here are
yes.
a couple of others. When would you choose GL Report Designer instead of using a standard or delivered GL report?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So when the standard delivered GL reports, and I think we all know that in FSM many times, every organization is different, right? There's not any organization, I think, or that Infor could meet all needs, right? So they have to do the best they can with getting the data out there. So when these standard delivered reports don't fully meet your formatting needs, your content, or the presentation needs, it's a perfect time to utilize Geo Report Designer or even Application Studio for that matter. We have done some amazing reports, and some of you have probably even seen some within your own organization where you can develop a presentation, or we even have a client where we included their logo on all of the reports, as well as a disclaimer that the report couldn't be dispersed outside of the organization, the legal disclaimers that are utilized. So anytime you find areas where those standard deliver reports are not including data that you need or specific account structures because the roll-up isn't there, this is where you would use a GL Report Designer report. Right? So hopefully that answered your question. If it did not, let me know.
All right.
Anything else?
Do we know if Infor has specified when GL Report Designer will be available for other modules like AR, AP, AM, etc.?
I don't think so yet. Mike and I were talking about this yesterday. We're seeing some of the rep sets for payables already show up, and I know some of those support some of the dashboards in payables. So we're thinking that they are on the roadmap. Receivables does have some already, as does assets for the one of the asset transactional reports. I wrote it down yesterday, and you think I put it in the go right ahead,
Debbie?
Mike. Yes.
Yes. Those reports you're talking about for like AM and AR, those are columnar reports.
Oh, Columnar. I apologize. Yes.
They're
Sorry.
not the GL Report Designer.
Yes, I misspoke. Thank you.
And I have not heard any rumblings at all about them moving GL Report Designer into other modules besides GL.
Yep.
It seems like they're going with the columnar reports in those other applications.
Thank you for that, Mike, and sorry I misunderstood.
Okay, great. How long do the rep sets take? We realize that it is data volume dependent, but if one were to schedule it for every hour, how much of that hour is taken with the replication?
So that's really going to depend on your organizational structure and the volumes of data. I can tell you that we have a client that runs them, I think, every 5 minutes without issue. So that will just depend. It really is going to be dependent on volumes, etc. I don't think we've seen any issues with running them more often than not. And again, I've seen every client's different. Some have no issue with it running once a day. Others like it once an hour. They can also be scheduled differently at the end of the month to accommodate more real-time reporting for month end as you're going through and reviewing data and getting your financial statements ready. Mike, you have anything else to add on that perspective? I know you've worked a lot with some of our clients on those.
The initial load, depending on your data, will run probably a little while, but every time you run the rep set after that, it only brings over new data. It doesn't do a complete reload every time. And I see scheduling at every hour. Yep, I have seen people do that all the time. And one other thing that they're adding to the Columnar reports is any report that is a Columnar list page or whatever, there will be a refresh data button that you can control when you, so a user can refresh the data too if they want to make sure that the report is current. And so, yeah, scheduling something every hour would not be any issue that I would have with that.
All right, thank you. Our next question includes a screenshot, so I might ask you guys to hop in the chat and take a look. Adam says he's trying to use the period dimension in a row to provide an annual view, similar to that allowed in Lawson GL 95. That is an option available in the row dimension dropdown. However, he's receiving the error message above. Do you know if that dimension isn't available yet, or maybe will be in the future?
So it's saying unsupported dimension selection, general ledger total entity year period.
Yeah, I'm getting that message too.
Interesting. General ledger total entity year period. Surprised it's not a calendar period.
This might be something we need to investigate,
Yeah.
and then we can get back to you.
Yep, I'm thinking
Okay.
so.
We'll jot that down and follow
No
up with you
problem.
there. A couple of other questions here. If you already have GL Report Designer provisioned, do you just have to do some enabling to start using Columnar?
So they're not dependent on one another. You do not have to have GL Report Designer to utilize Columnar. Sorry about that. I was thinking about this, but yes, there is a KB article. I'm not sure if there's training, to be honest with you. I mean, I know sometimes Infor, sometimes includes it in the release notes, but you'd have to find what release note. But basically it is going into back to my GL administration, and you'll find that over to the right side, there's an enablement piece that you can do. So you'll enable that GL transaction analysis and columnar search, make sure the rep sets are done. And then within the administration console, there's a configuration that you have to do, but I do believe there's a KB article on it. So yes, Jamie, I would definitely check that out.
With respect to Adam's question before, does the calendar period date need to be on the column? Is that why it's not supported?
I think we'd have to look at the whole report that he's building to determine that.
Thanks for chiming in, though.
No, that and maybe, so he's on a road dimension. Yeah, we'll get back to both of you on that. So I'll make a note both for Adam and Anant for that. Anything
Right.
else?
I don't see any others at this point.
I don't either. Great questions.
Yeah.
and
Again,
Thanks.
I thought I had seen one that was talking about earlier. I don't see it any longer, but the question was, is if you can, on Geo Report Writer Designer, if you can run the report for more than one accounting entity, a company. And yes, you can.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
To do
Yeah.
that, what you'd have to do is you'd have to open up the report. And on the report, you'll have a report selection field. And then you can add the accounting entity and then add the values for the 3 accounting entities that you would want. And that would be kind of like hard coding the report.
Yep.
But yes, you can do it for more than one company at a time.
Great. Thanks for catching that, Mike.
thank you. Okay, well, with that, I think we will wrap up. As I mentioned
Okay.
a couple times, we'll send this out, the replay, the deck, and then if you have any further questions or interested in, any support, we are happy to help you.
And on that general ledger total entity, I did find some information. It did say that you might be able to put that in a column. And then you could add an operator to the field for a current period, year to date, prior, that type of thing. So you might want to put that in a column. Sometimes I wonder about these documents, if they're true or not, but.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, well, thanks again, and thank you all for joining. And you'll see an email come through from us soon.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.